Welcome to another edition of the Getting Defensive podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me today, as always, is Mr. Andrew Kalat. So before we get started, I do want to remind everybody that the thoughts and opinions we express on the show are ours and do not represent those of our employers, even though some of us don't have employers.
Well, we can all aspire to be an unemployed bum like you. We'll get there.
That's right. So we have a guest today, and I'm going to let you introduce him.
Excellent. Thanks. Everybody gets an intro here, so I'll do my best. Today, we have someone probably well known to many folks out there, Dan Tentler. Hopefully I got his last name right. I'm trying. Also, probably better known by his online handle, which he goes by on most of the socials I've seen him on. Prominent cybersecurity expert and ethical hacker, well known for his expertise in penetration testing, social engineering, and security research. Currently, he's the founder of Phobos Group, a boutique security consulting and engineering firm founded in 2016. Phobos has worked with customers from nearly every market vertical, designed, built, and deployed infrastructure, covering all aspects of security from physical to digital to tabletop to even policy. Dan, welcome. And how did I do? Did I get anything wrong there?
Oh, you nailed it, man. Thanks. And I appreciate the invite, and I'm honored to be here. Thanks for letting me on.
Well, I feel like you're bringing up our level of expertise pretty tremendously on this one, so we'll do our best to bring something to the table.
So, thank you very much for agreeing to be here. I think you've got a lot of interesting background. When I look at your history, you've I would say been heavy on the offensive side. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and so in my career, I've sort of metronomed back and forth between attack and defense, and do you know who Richard Thiem is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Richard Thiem did a talk. He's like Elder God InfoSec dude. Fairly certain he's ex-CIA based on inference. But he did a DEF CON talk at must have been DEF CON 16, maybe it was DEF CON 18. It was 5 lifetimes ago. But it was called Staring into the Abyss. He has this excerpt from it, which is like, everything is just gray. There is no good. There is no bad. It's just everything is in the middle. And like, after doing attack and defense for so long, I'm like, I tend to agree. And so I described it to somebody else very recently as, imagine you're looking at like a vase on a stand, right? And like, there's lighting coming from one direction, and then there's like another light coming from another direction. There might be a different white balance or different color or something. And your job positions you, somewhere on the periphery of this vase, right? Maybe you're the red team, maybe you're the blue team, maybe you're GRC, maybe you're executive, whatever. You're all looking at the same vase. And like, maybe one person on this side can see the handle and this person on the other side can't. Or this person on this side sees like a pattern or a glyph or something in the paint job, and the person on the other side can't. And we're all working on the same thing. We're just looking at it from different directions. And so the more often you sort of change roles, you take this bag of tricks with you to the new role, and then you learn how that bag of tricks can be employed in the new role, and then you go back and then you like, hey, I was red team, now I'm blue team, and now I know how the red team thinks, and so now I can help the blue team orchestrate better defensive capabilities because I know what the attackers are thinking, because I am one. And then vice versa, you take that like, oh, this is how the blue team reacts, this is their methodology, this is how they react to these different types of scenarios and stimulus. Take that back to the red team and be like, now we have new intel for doing like heavily tailored social engineering scenarios and pretexts and stuff like that. And you keep going back and forth, and then at some point, like at the end of the day, the result is like whoever the customer is or wherever you end up working gets incrementally better security as a result of this sort of back and forth ratcheting. But yeah, I very much heavier on the attack side of things, because in certain circumstances, it's easier to break than it is to build. But that famous tenet of like defenders only have to defenders have to maintain perfect perimeter security. And if they make one mistake, then like the attackers get in. That is true. However, the minute the red team gets a shell, that tenet is flipped on its head. The attackers make one mistake, and their entire chain, their entire tool chain gets burned. Their payload gets burned. Their C2 gets burned. All the IPs associated gets burned. The domain name gets burned. The registrant get all of it. Like we did a gig one time for a big company in San Francisco, and we had to register a Apple developer account so that we could sign payloads. And that was an interesting discussion to have with Apple after the fact, because they weren't read into the situation. So like, yeah, it gets, yeah. And so like you get these legal boundaries of like where you're allowed to touch, and the surfaces, the contours of the outside of the company's perimeter that you're allowed to like engage with. But like, because everything on the West Coast is cloud, everything cloud, we love the cloud. Like, there's like this much left that is the company's infrastructure and equipment, and like everything else is Azure or AWS or Rackspace or Oracle or Salesforce or Atlassian, or you pick your poison. And so like things get interesting and weird fast, because when you're doing assessments in that sort of environment, your payloads are traversing other people's plumbing. And like you're forced as an attacker to deal with various constraints that defenders never considered and never ever will have to face in their careers. Like, if I want to get malware onto a laptop that somebody's running, like a Mac, for example, then I have to deal with Apple, and I have to deal with whoever their MTA is, which is either going to be Microsoft or Google. And then I have to probably deal with Proofpoint or whatever MTA security system they're dealing with. And like, none of these places are in scope. Like, and so it gets, right? So people say, oh, attack is easy. And I say, challenge accepted. Like, come do my job for a week and then we'll have a chat, right? And so like, there's a lot of, like, it depends on the personalities you're asking the questions to. Like, if you go to Virginia and you ask somebody in Maryland or Virginia, like, how hard does the red team have it? And they're like, oh, the customers are still running Windows 2000. It's like fish in a barrel with a nuke. But then you come out to the West Coast and it's like everybody's rocking brand new Apple Silicon, the fully patched Mac stuff. Like, you got NSO Group in the news every week now, I guess, for some reason, with some new Apple ODE, and everybody's throwing down patches and stuff. And it's like, it's interesting to see what people say when they respond to that sort of line of questioning, because it paints a picture of what they have been exposed to and what they don't know about.
Yeah.
And so it is wild deriving the landscape by inference alone. It's weird. It's like walking around in the dark blind and realizing you're on a hill now, or now you're in somebody's lawn, or like you don't know where you are until there's some sort of stimulus that tells you about it. And it seems like the more time you take to adequately phrase your line of questioning, sort of the better intel you'll get out from just random people on social media. But yeah, so yeah, TLDR, I've spent quite a lot of time on attack.
Interesting. You know, when I was way back when I was in the business, I really liked kind of mingling the red team with developers and SOC and whatnot. Do you see organizations, taking overt steps to do that? My concern, I guess, is that as an industry, we're becoming much more siloed. Like, people are a red teamer, or they're a programmer, or they're a SOC analyst, and they kind of go up in their vertical. And like you, I think there's a lot of value in that metronome, as you described it. Do you see that happening much?
No, I see the opposite, actually. What I see now is I see this mad bum rush to, like, okay, you know who Haroon Mir is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so did you watch his Virus Bulletin, like 2019 keynote?
I can't say that I did.
It's a really good talk, and if you have 45 minutes to blow, I encourage you to find it on YouTube. But there's this piece where I think it's called The Security Products We Deserve. I think you'd get a kick out of it. But one of the lines that I will an excerpt that I would like to snip from that is this piece where he says, if I go to my doctor and I go and I sit down in front of, let's say my doctor's a dude, I go and I sit down in front of his desk, and behind him there's like stuff on the wall, and there's like, his medical degree and all of his, his certifications and all the paperwork that says like I'm legit. He's like, if I go to my doctor and I look behind him, and even one of those diplomas is fake, that's not my doctor anymore. I'm out. I'm done. That's it. I would not trust my health. I would not trust my well-being to somebody that has forged their own credentials. But in security, that's like par for the course. And so because there is not a barrier to entry to work in computer security, it's not like you're an engineer. You don't need a degree. You don't need certifications. You don't need experience. You don't need, like, you can have ChatGPT write your entire resume and you can get a job at a company that also doesn't know anything about security, that used ChatGPT to write the job description. And now you have an organization that doesn't know what they need from a security person, having hired a security person who was formerly a hairdresser or changed oil at Jiffy Lube or whatever. And now you're in like this scenario where both sides are lying, neither will admit it, and like the result is the company just gets turned inside out like a gym sock, or like I'm reminded of my time at Intuit, where I watched a guy in front of me on Q Radar open up 10,000 items, like 10,000 like findings that needed to be manually reviewed, and literally do Control A, delete. And I'm like, you just like, there were days worth of investigations in that. And then I watched the manager come over and give him a pat on the back for doing such a good job and clearing so many things out of the SIM. And I'm like, you guys, what are you doing? And
I'm realizing I've been doing my job all wrong, though. I didn't know that was an option.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if I had known in 2008, the only thing that matters is the stock price, and I could get pats on the back and promotions by literally like just completely flat out lying and not doing my job and just deleting shit out of the SIM, it would have been a different career path, wouldn't it? But yeah, like what I'm seeing in the field is people scrambling over each other to try to get jobs they are unqualified for by faking certifications, by lying on their resumes. But there are very few people that you can plunk down in front of a machine and say like, all right, this is DWVA or DVWA rather, or WebGoat or something. Get me a shell. You have 30 minutes. Like, how many people could do that? And like, and that's not even saying like constrain them to not having internet access. That'd be for like the next tier up. But like, there are way too many people who work in security and who call themselves security experts that have like never touched a computer before somehow. And that's concerning to me. So like,
yep.
I see like some critical mass event happening where too many people in computer security are outed as not having the adequate background and skill set to be able to functionally do their jobs. And there's going to be some big bubble popping thing. And so like, I don't know whether maybe it's happening now, because I think, or maybe, and this is some accelerationist thinking, I guess, but like, you have Microsoft laid off tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. The same at AWS. Google did it. Dell, I think they're lopping off all of SecureWorks and casting it into the ocean, I think. I don't know if this is completely legit. I heard a rumor that Dragos like got rid of their entire pen test staff and that whole arm of the company is gone. And so you have all these people in the wind now. They're all back which is for me excessively frustrating, because now you have everybody that's like not J random necessarily, but you have like, Mr. I spent 20 years at Microsoft. I'm principal engineer now. I'm elder god status at Microsoft, but I've spent 20 years inside one company. So I may be an expert in things Microsoft, but that expertise isn't necessarily portable unless the job involves heavy political, like bureaucratic poking in jibing involving Microsoft. But that person says, oh, I had a really good throw at Microsoft. I'm going to be a consultant now. And because that person's famous or has 100,000 followers or whatever, like the press jumps on it, right? And so now you have these articles coming out. You have Ars Technica and Bleeping Computer, all these people say, so-and-so is starting their own consulting firm. And so now I get to compete with that person for business. And because that person has no experience running a business or running the connective tissue outside of the actual meat of the engagement, like the contracting and the lawyering and all the business stuff that like never typically sees the light of day, the customer has a horrible experience. And now the customer is flavored in that they're very cagey about doing business with not giant, well-established shops that will do the typical, send somebody of elder god status to the cons and put them on stage. But then when the customers come in and say, ooh, we like what that person had to say, we want to hire your company now. Now you get the 23-year-old, fresh out of college, never touched a computer before kid. And so there's this bait and switch that happens. And like,
it's the perennial consultant playbook right there.
Yeah, it's wild.
So do you think...
So like, my feeling is that that weather pattern, if that makes sense, of like all these orgs like squirting talent into the atmosphere like spores, that's not going to help stuff, because those people are going to go try and do security and they're not going to do it well, because they're not technical enough, but because there's a lot of bedside manner on either side of the actual engagement that they have never done before. And so like, that's going to make people not like security. If it's possible, they're going to hate it more now. But yeah, so that's just like me trying to, that's from where I'm sitting, is like, my company is 3 people right now. There's me, my co-founder, and we have a contract developer. We were bigger in the past, but like things happened and the market changed and like budgets shifted, or like one of the things that the newbies that are trying to do consulting tend not to realize is that in many circumstances, probably 75 to 90% of them, your ability to score a gig at any random organization is belied upon your relationship with the person who is willing to stick their neck out for you at that org to bring you in as a vendor. And so if you've established a relationship with somebody over the course of, try and do business with Amazon, I dare you, like or any major financial organization, like their procurement department, their procurement department is like a 6-month ordeal. And so that's just to close. And then we're talking about like a 2-week engagement, like not even 6 figures, like 2 weeks of like scratch the surface. We call them a security posture analysis, or SPA is like our most favorite offering, is like, we just come in and just do like a scrub. It's not even adversarial. We just like, hard hat, go in, flashlight, black mold, bats on fire, there's gremlins living under the sink. These are problems you should probably look into. We can help. Let us know if you want our help. Here's the report. Like just that is a 6-month to close the deal takes 6 months.
And most of those big companies don't want to ever hire small boutiques. Their third-party risk management companies say, nope, too small. Right. Even if it's a small engagement. I worked, previous life, I worked at a large bank, 10,000, more than that, employees, 80,000, sorry. Wow, I need coffee. And our third-party risk management wouldn't even look at you if you didn't have 1,000 employees and a Dun & Bradstreet rating here. Yeah. And it's like, but you're excluding all these options. I don't care. This is how we do things. Yep. So yeah,
we've
I
had
feel
to face
that.
Exactly. Like people have flat out, they're like, their second question to us is, how big is your team? Like the first question is, how old is the company? And we're like, we're founded in 2016. We're going to be 9 next year. And they're like, okay, cool. Check the box. All right. How big is your team? And we're like, is your question, how many employees does the company have? Or how big is the red team that's going to be assigned to your assessment? And they're like, how big is the company? And we're like, 4. And they're like, bye. Just not even a second thought. They're like, see ya.
But 2 of them have multiple personalities. Does that count? We can have like 6, 8, 10.
Yeah. But hey, I can make Perplexity and ChatGPT each spin up 10 personality types, and I can have that piped into 11 labs, and now I can have a heavily delayed You want Morgan Freeman on the engagement? How about David Attenborough? Like there was that dude that wrote, God, what was that like? He wrote this thing. It's on GitHub somewhere. This was fantastic. It was a script that it took a screenshot, not a screenshot. It took a picture from his laptop webcam every 5 seconds, uploaded it to ChatGPT, asked it to describe this image describe this image the way that David Attenborough would describe it if this was a nature documentary. Then it take that text and send that text to 11 Labs, where 11 Labs would read it in David Attenborough's voice,
Perfect.
output a WAV file, it would download the WAV file, and then it would play it locally. And so this is a thing that's right now, it's on GitHub, you can go and get for free right now, that will use your webcam to look at you while David Attenborough describes your plumage and how you are, you know, if you have a mug of coffee or a bottle of water, it's like how you're this endeavoring specimen who is smart enough to go to the watering hole and have your own supply so that it's not encroached on by predators or whatever. It's bonk. And you can do this now. It's wild. Like, so how many personalities you want me to manufacture? Procurement? Like,
So kind of circling back on this a little bit, do you think this is like a gap in hiring managers or procurement teams of like understanding what they're buying or what they're hiring and how to even stack rank it and assess it?
I expect that there will be some non-zero, but are arguably trivial. It's 5 to 10% of organizations that will actually sit down and like look at the news and then look at the job requirement and be like, we probably shouldn't fuck this one up. Sorry, can I swear on this show? Is it like...
Sure. Oh, good.
Yeah. So like, profanity is salt. You need just enough.
Just enough. Right.
But yeah, like you want to look at it. We don't want to fuck this up. Like if we fuck this up, then like the building is going to catch fire. Like we want to avoid that. That's where we keep our stuff. Like that's usually a bad idea. We have for 15 years seen Equifax lie during a congressional hearing and get away with it. We've seen Facebook do the same. We've seen Google do the same. We've seen like company after company after company gets hauled in front of lawmakers and they just lie and nothing happens. And so we see Equifax get pulled inside out like a gym sock. Target, Ashley Madison. The news from today is that Palo Alto has PHP-based remote code execution unauthenticated on the perimeter. Wasn't Palo supposed to be the good one? Like, I don't know. I mean, whoever decided to put PHP on firewalls, I hope they feel good about themselves. But like, there is no consequence for doing the bad. You don't get your hands slapped, you don't go to jail, you don't lose your job. Like, you can fuck around and be safe knowing there will never be a finding out, because by the time something happens, like you've quit or you've collected your bonuses and punched out, or you're in a different division, or the vendor got acquired by a bigger vendor and you cashed out all your stock and now you don't have to work anymore, or like, pick your poison. So like there is no negative reinforcement for doing a bad job. There is no negative reinforcement for hiring the wrong people. Well, in with respects to specifically their performance in security, like most of it is smoke and mirrors. It's kind of a light show. Like even when the stock takes a hit, it's fine again in a week. And I know that like 10 years ago or whatever, I remember Jeremiah Grossman and I were talking on Twitter about it, and he actually went and fetched, I can't remember what company it was, and the last week has been nuking Twitter anyway, so I couldn't go back and tell you if I wanted. Maybe it's buried in my archive somewhere, but he drew a graph. He took the stock chart from some company, and I can't remember which one it was, but the stock was like going up and up and up, and then like they had a breach, and then it like fell, and then a week later it like picked back up and started going again. And so he drew this line saying, this is where the stock would have been if there was no breach, and this is where the stock currently is post-breach after the dip. And so he was like, this delta is 4 to 7% sustained throughout the rest of the life of the stock, unless some big thing changes and it gets washed, or they do a split, or there's a reverse split or something like that. And so the math was, and this was almost 10 years ago or so, where you could articulate that experiencing a breach would cause a permanent 4% devaluation of the company's market cap.
Interesting.
And then that would be like an arguable point, because then you get the finance bros with the ties that show up and you're like, no, but you can do this and leverage this and blah, 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 blah. And they talk away the risk. Fine. But that's only, your ability to measure that is predicated upon the fact that the company is publicly traded. If it's a private company, there is no stock. That's not a metric you can use to make the argument. And so like, then you get like, who was it? A colleague, I won't mention who they are, that but they're also with us on Blue Sky. I'm sorry, Blue Sky, on Mastodon. Who recently complained to me that their leadership wanted security to be a profit-generating department, and because security is not a profit-generating department, they're not going to get the budget that they asked for or wanted.
Wow.
And it immediately snapped me back to Twitter 2011, when I was talking to my leadership there, where I first got my first exposure to Hadoop and the pig programming language. I did not know, it's not even a program, I guess it's a query language. But like, if you've never messed with Hadoop, and this was the only time I've ever messed with Hadoop, was Twitter, because that's how they had all their file systems and logs and everything all set up at the time. I don't know what it's like now. It's been a long time, and things are very, obviously incredibly different than they were in 2011, 2012. But there was like 44,000 or maybe 45,000 servers. I think they were all running either CentOS or RHEL. And it was like Hadoop was the big sort of, load-bearing infrastructure. It was how they shipped logs around. It was how they handled a lot of sort of dealing with files and dealing with output and dealing with logs and debugging and stuff under the hood. And so when I first got my hands on Hadoop, I started writing queries, just really simple ones. In the last 24 hours, on all of Twitter's edge, show me authentication failures. And it was like terabytes of just logs. Just stupid, ridiculous, dumb amounts of data. Like terabytes of logs for a day. And just filtered to login failures. And then I was like, okay, same query, sort count per user. It took an hour to run, but a lot shorter output. And now I have like, sort -rn, sort by highest count down. Now I have, for the last 24 hours, the usernames who had the highest number of auth failures on the edge. Interesting. Now let's take that and go look in the web server logs and say, I want all the source IP addresses for all of those auth failures on the edge globally for 24 hours, top 50 users. And I remember seeing the output and seeing just like commas, just stupid numbers. And I'm like, if I break this out into country, then I'm doing like, I'm reversing my way through this pile of data, and I'm unearthing botnets, because now there's dedicated IP addresses that are known attackers that are trying to log into these top 10 usernames today. And then yesterday they did a different 10. And then the day before that, they did a different 10. And so it's these same, 500 problematic source IP addresses responsible for like a bulk of the terabytes of log data that we're storing and shipping around. And I'm like, I bet that if I massage this the correct way, we could probably create some sort of subscription model where, like, God, who was it at the time? iDefense? I don't remember where. I think it was iDefense. There was several pen testy threat intel type shops. And this is before threat intel became like the big industry or whatever that it is now. And I'm like, this strikes me as valuable-ish enough data that somebody would be willing to pay a subscription for, because I run all my own gear in my home office, and I have a colo as well. And like, I think it would be useful to have like the top 10 or top 50 IP addresses that have been attacking Twitter's edge in the last 24 hours as like a threat intel feed that I can just pipe into my firewall. Like that seems, that would be cool. Like that's one less thing that I have to deal with, is if somebody's going after Twitter, they can't come after me anymore because they've already shot their load at Twitter and it didn't work. And so now their info is burned. And so I'm like, this is something that we could try and investigate. And I tried to pitch it to Twitter's leadership, and they were like, literally, verbatim, that's a stupid idea. You shouldn't have wasted your time. And I'm like, wow, thanks. That's going to help your
employee. Did you tell them you could put it on a pew pew map that would go back and forth on the globe?
No, but
marketing.
I think this was before Norse. I think Norse
Good.
happened.
I'm glad you got the reference.
I left. Yeah.
I'm glad you got it.
But no, I told you, yeah. Like I am still dying for it. And please, if you are watching this after the fact, if you have, it was famous at the time, this picture that was on Twitter of somebody walked into Black Hat, the Black Hat after Norse collapsed, and visited their booth because you have to pay for all that in advance.
Okay.
So Norse paid to have a booth set up. And so the company didn't exist anymore by the time Black Hat came around. But Black Hat fulfilled their contractual obligations to do the things that they agreed to because of the purchase. So they outfit the booth the way that Norse asked. Big booth, or a big Norse logo, print out like vinyl hanger, whatever, on behind them. A table with a black tablecloth, and a post with a 40-inch flat screen TV with the Pew Pew map on.
Nice.
How can the Pew Pew map exist if the company doesn't? And this was like this revelatory thing for people who lost their shit on Twitter when they saw the picture. They're like, North was fake? Yeah.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
So like, I am dying for that picture. I have not been able to find it, but it is like somebody just took a picture and shipped it straight to Twitter from the floor, and it was circulated for months or possibly even years after the fact. And I need to, at least once a quarter, I have a need to reference that picture to show like, this is what happens when you fake it till you make it. In this case, Norse didn't make it, but very, 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 very few instances of faking it till you make it, do you make it? Because you can't, the subterfuge doesn't last unless you're in a company that has 100,000 employees, and you can do what some other folks that I've seen do, which is deflect, defer, deny. If somebody assigns you work, complain that some manager in another department needs to okay your access to a box, and that's why it hasn't been done yet, and you're waiting, it's in a wait state, or like the person you need to ask for authorizations on paternity leave, or make up another excuse as to why the job that you were supposed to do didn't get done, and it's somebody else's authorization, somebody else needs to flip a light switch, and it's not you, and it's out of your hands, et cetera, because eventually the need for that work to be done will be taken away from you and given to somebody else, and then it will actually get done, and it'll get done in a different way. And so what you're doing is training people to not give you work. And that only works for enough time that the leadership or your connective tissue inside of the organization realizes that you're full of shit. And when they realize you're full of shit, they yank your fancy-pantsy six-figure salary and all your stock options, and they kick you the fuck out. And then you go and you try the charade with the next shop. And then at some point, then the managers start talking. And after 3 or 4 or 5 of these, you can't really work in those big companies anymore. So you got to go to a startup and do the same thing. But you can't go to a startup and do the same thing, because in a company with 10 people, it's going to be really obvious, really fast that you don't know what you're doing and you don't have any work output. And so those people, that demographic tends to hide in the larger organizations. And now the larger organizations are like snow shoveling all those people out. And so like, it's getting weird out here. But yeah, I have now.
So one thing is, it seems like we've worked at the same places before. What you just described. Going back to something you said a little bit ago, I worked at a large company that had one of those, onerous third-party risk management departments, and actually oversaw one of them. And I can tell you one of the issues is, you don't have a lot of metrics to base, like objective metrics to base risk on. And
Yeah.
so I know that a lot of organizations use, organizational age and employee, size as a proxy for, like, are they good? And,
Yeah.
so basically saying, well, if you're not big because, well, I guess you're not good. And because if you were good, then you would be bigger. I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not saying that is right. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that I think that's, what's going on. My other, I guess, other observation is that there's a lot of people, as you just described, that have been let go. Like, and in fact, I've been helping out with a job seekers council because there are so many people in the industry right now who are trying to find jobs. And it's kind of like this surreal situation where you have, on the one hand, media report after media report describing this, dearth of unfilled cyber jobs. And at the same time, you've got like people being laid off en masse and not able to find work, even though they have experience. Now, those people that are being laid off, we know intuitively are all, they span the, the range of quality and experience and capability. And I think that you're right, that a lot of people, and I see this in myself to some extent, like a lot of people, just because you're good at your job, you're a good pen tester, you're a good, SOC analyst, you're a good, risk manager, doesn't mean that you're good at running a business, right? And so it seems to me like one of the things that is ahead of us is some people are who are good at that are going to leverage the talent pool that's out there. Either that or that talent pool is going to go do something else like farming. I don't know. But it is really a strange situation that we have right now. We've got lots of talent kind of sitting idle. At the same time, like the macro picture is like the security situation is getting worse and worse and worse. And I'm sitting, like, I'm not in the business anymore. I'm kind of sitting on the sideline saying, like, God, that's fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I see, like, it's one of these, like, I've said it before, the beatings will continue until the people who, the beatings will continue as long as the people who make the laws about computers don't know how computers work. And so that's one big angle of it, right? Then another is, it's similar, is the beatings will continue until the people who are in charge of computer security at, any, pick a company, throw a dart. If the people who are in charge of computer security at a company that has, the requisite size to have big opinions don't know what they're doing, then it's just pathlids all the way down. And so, like, it's one of these, so far as I can tell, and this is my exceedingly scientific, nuanced, peer-reviewed metric of scream at the internet to stop putting shit online for 10 years. I think it got worse. Like, I have been screaming into social media for, since 2010, I want to say, about, look at the random nonsense that I found on the internet, to the point where, like, conferences won't even take these talks anymore. If I mention Shodan at all in any of my presentation material, they're like, no, enough, you're done, stop, fucking, you've had your 3 movies and your show, get out. And so, like nobody wants to hear it anymore, but the problem's getting worse. And so, like, I think that this is one of these, like, do you know who Ron White is? I'm just, in my brain, I'm picturing, I mentioned Ron White, now somebody's going to go find a reason why Ron White is bad, and I'm going to be the bad guy, because that's how the internet
the comic
works. Yeah, the comedian.
The comic,
like, he was big in the 90s. He was part of, like, the Jeff Foxworthy, the Redneck tour, if I forget. But yeah, so he had this bit on stage where, and I keep forgetting to go get a clip of this, but he has this bit where he talks about a kid who keeps trying to pull a gigantic CRT television, because they weren't flat back then. There were televisions full of glass and vacuum and electrons, pulling on this giant TV that was on a TV stand that's too small. And, like, his wife is like, oh no, if the kid keeps pulling the the TV, it's going to fall on him. And he's like, no, just wait. And the wife's like, no, no, you're going to smush the kid. The kid might die. Like, no, you need to stop the kid from pulling the TV on this flimsy stand. And he's like, look, the kid might get hurt, but the TV's going to fall on the kid once. And then the kid will never, ever fuck with the TV on a flimsy stand ever again. And that will be a lesson learned. And I can't help but think of that bit that probably didn't age well from the 90s, where we just have to stand back and watch them fall on their face. That's where we are now. We have to let them fuck up and find out. Because if no amount of screaming from any of us is going to do it, we need them to burn the building down. We need them to lose an arm. We need them to lose an eye. Like, they need to feel negative consequences for making bad security decisions, because that's how they learn. And like, we have, for 15 years, insulated the shareholders from having to find out, from having to learn, from experiencing negative consequences. And where has it got us? It has got us to where we are now, where nobody takes security seriously. There's no barrier to entry. You have people that were former hairdressers, or like media personalities getting up and like trying to take credit for the entire voting village at DEF CON, or labeling themselves the freshly minted CEO of a social engineering company, or like you're stealing slides from people, putting those slides together, and then going to Facebook and presenting about social engineering to Facebook. And like, these people are welcomed with open arms, which is, to me, just batshit. Like, go back to Haroon Meer's thing with the doctors. It's like, if one certificate on their wall is fake, they're not my doctor anymore. You can't trust them. They're liars. They're con artists. But somehow in security, this is totally okay. And so we've painted ourselves into this corner. And so now I'm just like, all right, cool. Our backs are up against the wall. Now what? And so like, we can make some sort of ridiculous, contrived, Tom Cruise Mission Impossible 60 belt-driven, laser-run, quantum, blah, blah, MacGuffin to get ourselves out of this position. Or we can just wait for whoever's painting us into the corner to fall over and get covered in paint. And so, like, I'm of the mind at this point where, like, after 10 years of shouting, and it got worse, like, measurably worse, maybe it's time to let them find out. And so, like...
So do you...
Sorry, go ahead.
Do you think, like, ultimately... I'm just reflecting on this, and if so far the pain in a natural sense hasn't been enough, do we need something else? Do you think
I would argue
personal liability?
I would argue that the people who experience the negative ramifications of bad security decisions aren't the people that made the decisions. My supposition here is that somebody in a middle management or higher will make a bad call, and the pain of that bad call will be felt by the incident responders, not by the person that made the call. So,
Sure.
like, look at Colonial Pipeline, for example. Like, that's just a fresh-ish one. It's a couple years old now, whatever. I'm trying to think of a more recent one, and I can't think of one that has, I guess Ivanti, but I can't see behind the curtain there. Like, I got no intel from the inside of Ivanti, but like, whoever at Ivanti keeps releasing these patches that don't work and don't do anything. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
Right.
How do you still have a job? Like there is multiple, like, how many times does the press have to pull your pants down before leadership goes, you know what? You're not in charge of security anymore. Get out. And like, I mean, that's a perfect live fire example. Another one would be Palo Alto. If you look at Palo Alto for the last month, right? Palo Alto is like in the news every day the last week or two because unauthenticated remote code execution on the front end. Don't they make a firewall? Isn't this a security company? I'm having flashbacks to like 2012. Remember when the same thing happened to FireEye, when some German researcher figured out that if you shoot one email message across, was a PX device? I forget what it was. The one that did the email filtering, like the Barracuda competitor.
Yeah.
You shoot one email across the thing, it's impregnated with a 7-zip. 7-zip is the 7-zip payload is a absolute file path, because you could do that in 7-zips. You can't do that in regular zip. It uncompresses to a specific path in the file system, overwrites the Python file parser for a specific file format. And in this case, it was RTF. And then the second email was just something with a throwaway RTF file to trigger the parsing code, which is now Python interpreter. And so by sending 2 emails, the guy got root on a FireEye appliance, and it blew up the internet like for a year. There were people made stickers and patches and you name it. And so like now here we are again, but it's Palo Alto now. So like Palo Alto did not learn from FireEye's mistakes, and the FireEye mistake, the whole like dropping a file somewhere and getting it to run because of a path issue, was something that I exploited as a 16-year-old kid in like 1995 with World War IV or with BBSs, which was like the BBSs, you dial into them and they had like a files section. And so you could go into the file section and there was a preview a zip functionality where behind the scenes, what it would do is it would just run pk unzip with some command line flags that would show you the contents of the zip file so you knew what you were downloading and you could select whether you wanted to download it or not. And so the trick was you make your own pkunzip.exe and you make that malware, or you make it do whatever you want. In my case, I just took command.com and renamed it to pkunzip.exe and uploaded it to the files section. And then I went and previewed a zip file, because the way in DOS, like back in the day, 100 trillion years ago, when I was like dinosaur farming, I would say ride my Triceratops to work, but I was not going to work when I was a teenager. DOS would look in your local current working directory first before looking at the system path. Everything else now does it the opposite way, and I think in large part because of these sorts of bugs. But like you send pkunzip.exe up the line, and then you go and preview a zip. And because pkunzip is still in the same directory as the file you're trying to preview, it runs your pkunzip and not the system pkunzip, and like, boop, now I have a command prompt. And so I was shelling BBSs like this when I was a kid because somebody on IRC told me that this was possible. I'm like, no fucking way. I got to try this. And it worked, and I lost my mind. But like,
well, I mean,
here we are, like the
to your point, CrowdStrike.
What?
To your point, CrowdStrike, their stock peaked. So we're recording this in mid to late November. So their stock before the issue with CrowdStrike peaked at 353. It bottomed out at 217. Sorry, they peaked at 390. They bottomed out at 217, and right now they are back up to 353. So nearly back to where they were before that massive outage.
Mm-hmm.
So from a stock price perspective, not too bad.
Yeah,
buy the dip.
Yeah,
I guess.
One of the things I observed and continue to observe is when some technology like Palo Alto, and Palo Alto has been preceded by many other firewalls, but once there's a vulnerability in some kind of technology that hasn't really been in the news before, it seems like there's this thundering herd of researchers like running to test it. And one of the, Andy and I both worked at a security company a long time ago. And one of the sad realities about security product companies is their security practices are often not that great. And I think it's because, well, I have lots of opinions on why that is, but I think it's because there's this view that the thing they're building is so secure that they don't you don't have to worry about what's behind the curtain, so to speak. Like it's and obviously that works for a little bit while people aren't aware of it and don't know how to get behind the screen. But then we have what is going on with Palo, and Palo is not alone. Like it's F5 and Ivanti and Fortinet, and like all of them are having this issue. But by the way, I think it goes back to something you said. A lot of the problems with these, I mean, obviously, like you shouldn't put PHP in a
on a firewall.
But if you put that to the side for a second, like one of the fundamental issues that we have that's making these things exploitable is that people are putting these, these management consoles straight on the internet. And something that Andy and I talk a lot about on our other show is like, the fundamentals still matter. And I think that was also one of the topics of a presentation that you gave. Like, I feel like we are continuing to learn the same lessons over and over again, maybe in different contexts, but like, way back when in the 90s, it felt like we spent a lot of time worrying about what we were exposing to the internet. And here we are again, having the same goddamn discussion 30 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. And this fits very squarely and neatly into the box of, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. Right.
Yes.
And so like, if you agree with that tenet, like, dear listener, if you agree with the tenet that if you ignore history, you're doomed to repeat it, that should very heavily weigh on your decision to skip all the fundamentals and go straight into senior red teaming after being a hairdresser. Like, if you don't know how this shit works, like, it's just, you're setting yourself on fire. You're wrapping yourself in like jerry cans, gasoline, and walking into the fireworks factory. And like, it's not going to go well. I mean, it'll go well for people watching, but you're going to have a bad time. Like, you're going to get a tan in the very worst way. But like, it's, to me, there's like this orc cloud of like moving parts, but they're all moving in the same direction. And it's not a direction that we would care for it to go. And so it's a lot of like race to the bottom, button mash till you succeed, have ChatGPT write your report for you. Like, every time that we as a people, an industry, produce a thing, a MacGuffin, a widget, a service, whatever it is, that allows people to like cheat code their way through things, there will be a small segment of people that are like, I can use that in a very clever and interesting way, like the one I described before, where the guy was able to create a system that has David Attenborough narrate him taking a sip from his glass in front of his... That's amusing. Great, cool. Plumb some shit together, make the internet laugh. I'm all for it. I mean, shit. January 5th, 2020, I FedExed a burrito from here in San Diego, because we had this like argument online about who had the better burritos. And I was like, I'll pay. It was $130 to FedEx it overnight for an $8 burrito. So I paid $130 to FedEx a burrito to a meet. It arrived on January 6th. There was some news that stomped our little escapade, and nobody seemed to care about the traveling burrito. And so like, I'm all for doing like shenanigans to make people laugh. That's fine. But like, it's another thing to say, I'm going to take this technology and I'm going to be as fucking mustache twirling evil guy as like, I'm going to rip off everybody I can rip off. I'm going to deceive and defraud everything that like, if you've played Monkey Island as a kid, the premise of those games, the old LucasArts point and click adventure games, Day of the Tentacle, Monkey Island, Full Throttle, all of them, fantastic games. But the premise of the game was essentially credential stuffing in disguise. You find an item in the game and you get stuck somewhere. And the objective in the game is you take this item out of your inventory and you literally rub it against everything that exists in the game as an object that you can rub something against until... And I remember this one drove me absolutely batshit, was one of them, I think in Monkey Island 2, there's a portion where you actually get a monkey, like a live monkey. And of course, Guybrush opens his pants and puts it in his pants because that's where the inventory goes. Correct. The 90s. They got away with it a lot.
Yeah.
But at some point in the game, I got stuck. And took me days to figure it out. And it was like, you had to use the monkey on a fire hydrant that existed at the top of a waterfall to turn off the waterfall so you could go behind the waterfall. And the mechanic was, it's a monkey, you should be able to use it as a wrench. And I'm like, drove me crazy. But the solution to that puzzle for me as a kid playing Monkey Island 2 was take everything in my inventory and rub it against this fire hydrant until something happens. And like, in my brain, that's how every new technology that is exposed to consumers gets handled. And so right now, before it was blockchain. You take blockchain and fucking rub that shit on absolutely every goddamn thing you can touch. If you can see it, if you can smell it, if NASA's posting about it, fucking go to space and rub that shit on the stars. Just, because money's going to fall out, I guess. Right?
Supposedly.
And so now they're doing the same shit with LLMs. Like, there was that, like, the most recent thing that was 2 days ago's news was some guy got Gemini to tell him to kill himself. And that made the news. And the last thing before that was a big thing in the news that I saw was something to the effect of, or maybe we took part in it, if I recall correctly, some car dealership in like Chicago or Ohio or something like that put an LLM, I think it was a GPT behind the scenes, into a chat tool on their website so that you could ask the dealership questions about their inventory or whatever. I think it was Chevy or something like that. You could ask questions about various trucks and cars and stuff, and it would give you, and like entice you to buy whatever. And for 2 days, there was a bunch of us. I got in on this, man. That was fun. To try to get this car dealership's LLM to say the most batshit nonsense stuff that we possibly could. And so we made a mockery of this dealership for a couple of days, and like it made the news, and but there were a bunch of screenshots. None of mine made it in, but a bunch of screenshots made it into some article or whatever. But like now we have reached the Monkey Islanding, if you will, of this new technology. And so like after every time this happens, so like water will follow the path of least resistance, right? If you have a water leak in your house and it gets into the cracks in your foundation or whatever, then you're really fucked because now you have water under the foundation and your part of your house is going to start sliding away. It gets ugly really, really, really fast, right? And so you want to take care to make sure that water doesn't get under the foundation of your house, right? Fairly straightforward conceptually. Fortunately, I've never had to deal with it, but I've seen horror stories. Holy crap. Like the house will just, no, that's bad. So if you take that sort of frame of mind and you apply that to like J-random technology from a security perspective, we are taking ChatGPT, and this is just the current, and I'm picking on GPT because this is just the most current iteration. There'll be something else after GPT goes away. And we're taking this thing and we're just fucking rolling on goddamn everything like it's a sander. Like it's just, like money is not going to come out of this thing. You're going to break your elbow jerking yourself off with it. Like it's just not going to go well. And so like that's going to end up going and finding the crack in the floor and seeping into underneath the foundation of your house. And I wish I could grab some of these people by the ears and be like, can I like turn your head a little bit to the forecasting part of this dialogue where we talk about like the ramifications of the shit you're pulling with this technology? Because none of it's good. Like, can it be used for good? Yeah, totally. Absolutely. But people aren't going to do that. They're going to try and speed roll. Like, I guarantee you, everybody that does certificate, with the exceptions of ISC squared, which I love to pick on because they're just a diploma mill, like God, who was it? New Horizons was here in San Diego in the 90s. You wanted an MCSE? Remember that mess? You want an MCSE? Yeah. You go to New Horizons, and they will let you take the test as many times as you want. And it's a multiple choice test, and they will show you what answers you got wrong. They're just giving you the opportunity to brute force the test. ISC squared is exactly the same way. So like, we're racing to the bottom, and at the bottom there's the foundation with the cracks in it. And so like, there's this confluence of nonsense. Like, what's that old missile defense game? You have these little lines coming in. That's where we are now. And so like, telling people they're doing it wrong doesn't work. Telling people that there's exploitable devices on the internet that shouldn't be on the internet it made things worse, because then people went out and found them and made like Mirai and Mirai 2.0. So like, I'm not 100% sure what the solution is, because like trying to talk about it intelligently and trying to have a frank discussion about it and trying to like forecast what bad stuff could happen by extrapolating has not been an adequate use of time without me just delving into a full like Dennis Leary rant. But like, I am now back to, again, like referencing my 90s comedians for this stuff, which is like, maybe we should just let Ron White take the reins for a minute and just like let the kid pull the TV onto themselves and then go to the hospital. And then maybe the kid will learn a lesson. Because like, there's a lot of frank discussion. There's a lot of very enlightened perspectives. There's a lot of dialogue flying around. A lot of people have a lot of really good ideas, but the problem is none of them are being implemented. Like, nobody's taking any of this advice. Like, we can post about it. Like, I get on stage and talk about doing this stuff because we don't have a sales department, right? That's how I tell people Phobos Group exists. And like, it feels like I made a difference when I get off stage. I get mobbed by people. They all want business cards. They want to talk shop. Those people take security seriously. But this is was it confirmation bias? They're already in the room to listen to me. Like, they made the decision to get out of bed at 9 the second day of the con to come see me because I'm the guy that's going to keep the people at the conference for the second day. So like, yes, of course I'm going to get mobbed when I get off stage. They're there for me. But like, if I did this at the bus stop, it would be a whole different experience. Or like if I went to Starbucks, you know? So like, I don't know. At this point, and it's been 15 years. At this point, I'm kind of tired. I'm like, you know what? Just let the fucking TV fall on the kid, because I don't know how else the kid's going to learn a lesson at this point. Because we've tried, I've tried everything that I have in my battery of attempts, right? So like, maybe we should just let it fall over. Maybe that'll be the lesson that gets learned. Because if we keep preventing it from falling over, then none of the negative reinforcement, none of the lessons learned happen, right? And so like, one of the most enlightening experiences I had in my career was when Twitter got popped during the watering hole attack in 2012, when China got everybody. And then it was like around San Francisco when I was there for work, because I had to fly up for a week every 5 weeks or whatever as part of the gig. There were discussions at lunch with other Dropbox, Google, Facebook, you know, whoever, like people we met up with for lunch. They all got hit. And not a lot of them talked about it because they didn't want like the egg on their face of, oh no, we got popped. And we're like, no, but you get like, different people had to try it. For China, this is work. They have an office building full of people, and it's not the same people going after you that went after me. Same exploit, yes. Same C2 infrastructure, almost certainly. Same playbook, very close, like 80% congruency. Maybe we should be looking at that as a Venn diagram and looking at those juicy outside crescents of like, what did this person do slightly different than this person? Because at Twitter, the reason that they got caught was because whoever got in was good enough to stay under the radar for something stupid like 6 months, which is bonkers.
Wow.
So like, they turned the reins over to somebody, and this is me, like my hypothesis based on what fell out after the tree got shook. The thing that got them caught. So, okay, I should back up a little bit. The attacker's infrastructure was essentially a iOS developer in Idaho, Ohio, Iowa, somewhere, not California, somewhere in the Midwest, VPN'd in, attached their home workstation, or I guess their Twitter laptop to the VPN, and then left on paid vacation for like a week. 2 or 3 days after their paid vacation starts, that laptop is making MySQL queries directly over the corporate VPN to the production MySQL cluster that housed, I think it was called the Darkwing database. Everything was named after birds at Twitter, absolutely. And when they ran out of birds, they started picking dinosaurs and cartoon characters and stuff. So somebody decided that, and I didn't even know that this database existed at the time, but there was a thing called the Darkwing database. And that was a database that, if memory serves, and again, 2012, so my memory is a little foggy, the relationships between users, like who's following who, and credentialing. Who's following who and credentialing. That was its own database. And so this attacker, in their genius, infinite wisdom, decided to do a MySQL dump of this database, a live database, across a VPN link to a developer in another state that was connected via, I don't know, cable modem or whatever. And the shell on their box was a payload delivered via a Java Rhino exploit that came from iPhoneDevSDK.com, which had been compromised with a Java applet that was signed. So Java got run in the browser and executed system commands like Java Rhino. I love Java Rhino. It was one of the juicier ones back in the day. I used Java Rhino to great effect. My boss at the time at Twitter he did not believe me that this existed. He did not believe me that Java Rhino was a thing. And I was like, no, I promise there's a piece of Java code that you can exploit on Linux, Windows, and Mac. It's the same code. It will get you the same shells. And he's like, I don't believe you. And I'm like, then you suck at your job. I don't know how else. Like, you shouldn't be in charge of security if your engineers are coming to you telling you there's bullshit in the wild. And they're like, I don't believe you. So, get the fuck out of the way. You're a speed bump. Get out of here. What the fuck? But like, the attacker was in China. It was phoning home on port. I want to say it was fake DNS. It was an SSH tunnel that was a reverse connection. The connection was instantiated from the payload binary out over the WAN to wherever the listener was, somewhere in China. Through that SSH tunnel, the attacker had LAN. It was an SSH connection to a Twitter laptop. Over that plumbing, VPN from the colo or Juniper SRX or SSL VPN to the user, and then another hop from the user SSH tunneling back to China. They tried to run a MySQL dump on a database that was like terabytes in size.
Mhm.
What happens? I'm testing your DBA knowledge. What happens? What's one of the first things that happen, the important thing that happens when you issue a MySQL dump command on a MySQL database?
It locks the database.
That's right. It locks the tables. What happens when the database that controls user authentication and user relationships for Twitter gets fucking locked at like 8 p.m. on a Wednesday or whatever it was? The whole
Everybody
site
takes a break.
whales. The whole site went
Yep.
down because anytime
Yep.
you wanted to do anything, follow somebody, block somebody, unfollow, so the block didn't exist back then. Follow somebody, unfollow somebody, sign up a new account, change your password. Broken. Server error 500. Sparks start flying out of the server racks at Twitter. And so like we get paged. I'm with another guy who I was actually having a discussion with earlier today and yesterday. It was Oreo Shake, his name is Neil. Really nice guy. I met him when I worked at Twitter. He was like hardcore Ruby security dude. He was on the product security team and I was in security ops. But since we're the only two Southern California people, we got to be chummy. And so him and he was running I think it was a local user meetup like in like Newport Beach or like or Orange County for Ruby users. And the two of us were at like, it must have been like a Chili's or a TGI Fridays or something like that. And we're using their patio and he's doing a talk on content security policy and like security headers and how to use them in Ruby in 2012 for the people at the meetup. And I was just there to hang out and just learn stuff because I'm not much of a Ruby guy. I mean, I was a little bit of a Ruby guy because Metasploit, but like only enough to like do interesting stuff in Metasploit. And so our phones are going off. They're blowing up. And Neil's in the middle of his talk. And we're like, this looks bad. And so we get on a conference call. We like excuse ourselves to another part of the restaurant. And they're like, stop everything you're doing. Book a flight. We need you both in the office tomorrow, ASAP. Shit's gone down. And we like look at Twitter and Twitter won't load. And we're like, and they're like, yeah, there's been a security incident. We'll read you in. Right. So yeah. Booked a flight, got on the plane, flew in, got in around 11 a.m., noon, something like that. Walk in, there's this long conference table. All the security staff, both teams are in there. And they have the laptop from the guy because the instructions they gave to the guy were, they called the guy who was on vacation. They were like, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you need to explain everything you're doing right now. And he's like, I'm at a bar. I have a Mai Tai. I'm on PTO. I've been on PTO for like 3 days. I'm not sure what this call is about. And they're like, okay, this is going to suck, but you need to get back to your laptop as soon as humanly fucking possible. You need to make sure it's at 100% charge. You need to shut it. You need to take it immediately to the closest 24-hour FedEx, put it in an envelope, pay. We don't care how much it costs. You need to get that laptop to us as soon as humanly possible. And he was like, oh, did something bad happen? And they're like, yes, try to look at Twitter. And he was like, oh, shit. And they're like, yes, shit. Send the laptop in now. And so they had that laptop in the meeting. And so they're like, all right, we've imaged it already. We put the image on some file share or whatever. And I'm sat next to my buddy John, the guy that got me my job. And he was employee number 12. And so he was like God tier everything. He had access to every box. And so I'm sat next to John and he's paging around inside the file system. He SSH'd into the server that they put the image on and he was like screwing around in the file system. And I'm like, and so what they had discovered up until that point was the binary that was running was hiding inside of a .cups directory and it was called cupsd. Macs don't use cups. Macs have their own printing spaghetti. Like they don't need cups. Cups does not exist on a Mac. but cups was there. So it was hiding inside this user's .cups directory, and it was a cupsd binary, but it wasn't really a cupsd binary. It was just called that. It was a single fat binary that was a statically linked, didn't have any dependencies. You ran it and it phoned home and it established a connection for the attackers. Besides that, I have no other intel about the actual C2 that was in use. I suspect because it was nation state, it was probably really cool on their end, but on our end, it was less. So he's paging around and I'm like, dude, ls-lash for me. And he does. And cupsd is 6 months old. And I'm like, you guys. And he puts it up on the projector. And like the room goes quiet for like a full 5 minutes. Like these guys have been 5 miles up our ass for 6 months and we had no idea. None. Zero. They were silent. They were deadly. They were effective. They passed the reins to the new kid. I'm guessing. I don't know how somebody who stayed silent for 6 months could make a fuck up as hard as MySQL dump over that ridiculous circumnavigating 3/4 of the fucking globe plumbing. But like, that's what got them caught, was one dipshit running MySQL dump at the wrong time. If that guy, whoever it was, didn't run that command, they'd have been in there forever. And so like, I tell that story a lot, and the first big question in the room was, why can an iOS developer who is a remote employee access production MySQL infrastructure at all? 2, how the fuck did he learn about the Darkwing database? Because half the people in the security department don't even know it exists. So the answer was, they got in through this guy, and because I don't remember if there was any endpoint AV of any kind. I'm not sure that there was. I know there was Jamf, but I can't remember if there was anything. So like nothing got caught on the laptop, but they were quiet enough to stay hidden for 6 months. And so the next question was egress policies. Like, how are they able to egress this data without us noticing? Nobody was looking because nobody thought to look. And so like the next 2 or 3 months was this massive overhaul of the entire security apparatus inside of Twitter. That was an interesting ride. But like,
but it takes something like that to cause that overhaul, right?
You need the entire security apparatus in a conference room experiencing that butt pucker to have the, like, it needs to be written page to disk in the brain, right? You read it online, you hear, anecdotes about people having experiences like this, you hear other people telling these stories, but it's an entirely different thing to have to deal with it. And like, there is not enough people dealing with it to come out of that experience with the requisite like fear of, fuck, I better learn how to at least do my job adequately, because if I don't, it's going to be my laptop with the shell on it, and I'm going to look like a complete fucking dipshit if my title is senior security engineer, and China has been using me as a fucking puppet for 6 goddamn months. Like, who hires you after that? Not me. So like,
well, and you make an interesting point. At least I hear this point, which is that folks who have been through a major breach actually have really good wisdom they've built. But are often, but they're also looked down upon as, oh, well, it's your fault or whatever. Like, they're tainted because they've been through a major breach. I don't look at it that way. I think those are the folks like who've got real world. They've been to war. I want that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. The people who will be the engineers of in my opinion, the people that will be the engineers of the most clever, effective, highly measurable, highly valuable solutions will be the people that find themselves in those incident response rooms, whether they're an attacker or a defender. Because at the end of the day, it's not so much like chess, but I mean, you learn where you made mistakes when your mistakes are exposed. If you never make a mistake, then you never learn anything. You just keep doing exactly the same thing you've been doing forever. And so one of the, again, in my opinion, one of the chief reasons you have these attitudes in workplaces where they heavily employ the use of, it's always been this way. It just worked. Just,
Yep.
I saw this yesterday. It was like the something principle. There was somebody posted about it on Mastodon. They were like, there's a word for this. It was the whole idea of like, don't tear down a fence until you understand why the fence is there. And it's one of those things where like, if you go in, you're like, a new...
It's the Chesterton's fence.
That's the one. Yeah, I saw that yesterday and I'm like, oh, that has a name. Cool. But yeah, it's the whole like, don't go into a place and start ripping shit out of it until you understand why it exists the way it exists. That's sort of a dying breed. Like people don't do that anymore. They just show up and they're like, I'm the new CISO. I'm going to shit pan everything and bring in my people. Who are your people? Yep. My people are the people that invented time at Black Hat that one time, Crown Sterling or whatever nonsense. Great. Happy trails. Short the shit out of your stock. I'm out. See ya. People don't want to learn. People don't want to have experiences. People want to see Mr. Robot on television and go, that's fucking cool, and go straight from whatever it is they're doing now, which is not computers, into being a senior red teamer. And they are permitted to do so. And the people that permit that transition are the ones that can hold themselves accountable for the world burning down, I would argue more than 3/4 of all the massive breaches that we see in the news all the time. In almost every single one, they're like trivially, they could have been trivially avoided if they just did these 1, 2, 3 things. And these 1, 2, 3 things are like literally security 101 that we all learned in 2005 or whatever. Or like the people that made these decisions have never done IR ever in their entire lives. They've never suffered a breach. They've never been held accountable for any bad decisions that they've made. And so like, now we have this dichotomy of like, here we all are painted into a corner and the people with the roller don't know what they're doing. And so we have a choice to make. We can either help them with their roller and continue painting ourselves into a corner, or we can just let them fall over and get covered in paint and be like, now maybe next time you won't do it this same way, because trying to reason with them has not worked in 15 years. And so like, if reason doesn't work, what is left? So like, I don't know if that's like I want to argue that that's like the pragmatist's approach, but maybe it's the nihilist's approach. I'm not sure. Like there's a bunch of different ways to slice that.
Well, tell you what, I've got to run pretty soon. So this has been an amazing discussion, and I'd love to have you back.
Sure, it's fun. I just get to rail about nonsense for an hour.
I mean, I'm now completely depressed, and I'm going to go drink heavily. But otherwise, it's been lovely.
Sorry, my apologies. I was told by the guy that installed the cabling for the ridiculous amount of security cameras I have in my house, that he comes to me only when he wants to hear news that will make him depressed. And I'm like,
that's fair.
I'm not sure if that's a compliment.
So, well, thank you again for being here and sharing your wisdom. I think I got a lot out of the discussion. So,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me
again. And it was nice to finally see you in person. So, or virtually in person.
Yeah, I would be happy to do it again.
Yeah, this is, like I said, this has been a great discussion. I'm interested what would you like to leave people with? Any causes you care about? Any place you would like them to visit to learn more about you or Phobos?
Sure. So phobos.io. And for those that have never heard of Phobos, I find myself spelling this quite often. PHOBOS.io. Phobos, the Greek god of war, the one of the moons of Mars, and also coincidentally, and I did not intend for it to end up this way, the first level that you start out in when playing Doom 1. Like you start out and you're in Phobos lab. Go. And I'm like, oh,
that's true.
Yeah, we're a small shop, but we do interesting and colorful work. We are not a rubber stamp shop for compliance reasons. We can do compliance stuff, but we are not where you go if you just want something to show KPMG to make them go away for another year. We're a custom tailored engineering shop. We do blue team stuff. We do red team stuff. We do advisory stuff. We do IR. Come use us and not, do big JRandom, bait and switch pen test shops. But if I could leave the audience with one sort of guiding principle is take the time to learn the thing. You don't have to be a ninja super expert in the thing. You don't need to be elder god wizard Perl or Python or Java or JavaScript programmer to like do the thing. You just need to know enough that it makes your job a little easier, right? I write lots of code. It's bad. I do not call myself a developer, but like I can code technically and code in like 5 languages. That makes me sound great, but like one of those languages is Pascal, and I haven't touched Pascal since the 90s. Could I pick it back up again? Probably begrudgingly. Would I? If the price tag is right, but like,
Sure.
take the time to learn the thing. You don't need to spend 3 months learning the thing, but like, just become a little bit more knowledgeable because it adds up. Holy shit, does it add up? And it becomes very portable. And if you teach yourself to learn the thing, just this much of the thing, that skill of learning a new thing is incredibly portable. And that will make your life a lot cooler to everyone else, even well outside of your job or outside of security. Just take the time to learn the thing, just a little bit about the thing, please.
It's great.
Awesome advice.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was a
yeah.
pleasure to be here.
And love to have you back. So many more things like that I would love to talk about, but we go on and on and on and on. For those listening, you like the show, it's a new format for us. Give us some feedback, give us some love. If you like it, if you don't like it, maybe a little less love, but still love. And tell a friend. We're trying to build this new format up, and we've got this will be on YouTube as well, and all the major podcasts and even minor podcast feeds out there. So let us know what you think.
That's right. All right. Thank you
Anything
all.
for you,
Thank you
Jerry?
again, Dan.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
All right.
Happy to come back. Thanks again, fellas.
And all of the show notes will be on where can we find all that, Jerry?
It's gettingdefensive.com.
Excellent. Wonderful. And with that, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Pleasure.
Yeah,
Bye.